Let's talk about Yuga Aoyama, also known as the Shining Hero. Can't Stop Twinkling from Class 1A of the My Hero Academia franchise. Yes, I would like to start getting deep diving into the characters of the My Hero Academia universe and really talk in depth about them. And I figure, why not start with number one of Class A? And I figure I'll go down the list of the students one by one, and I'd like to give you my personal thoughts on their character and what they've done so far and what possibly could be in their future. Aoyama, Can't Stop Twinkling, is an interesting case because the minute you see him in the first season of My Hero Academia, you realize that he is a little different. He's kind of French. I want to say he's. I think they mention he's like a French exchange student, or maybe I got that information from somebody else. He's very flamboyant student of UA, very prideful of himself. He's always trying to grab the attention of people around him. You can tell that by the way he named his superhero name, Can't Stop Twinkling. His ability is very unique, if you can say that. He shoots a laser out of his tummy, or his navel, and that in itself is something I've never personally seen before. There could be something like that somewhere in Marvel or DC that I'm just not familiar with, but Aoyama is the first one that I have seen shooting a laser from their navel. It kind of reminds me of Cyclops' laser from X-Men. It doesn't seem to pierce anything, but it pushes things, and there's a point where he has to run a 40 in his class in the first test of being in Class 1A, basically run to see how fast they can finish like a 40-yard dash or some shit. And he uses the laser to push himself forward, which almost seems cheating because you're not really using your leg muscles, but I mean, he's using his quirk to help him solve a problem, and that's what pros do in the My Hero Academia universe. Aoyama really hasn't had a whole lot of major moments yet in the series, and I need to preface, I have only seen the anime up to its current point in Season 5. I am interested in diving into the manga and reading ahead, but at the same time, I am enjoying this ride so much. I don't want to taint it by knowing what's going to happen. I guess I'd still get the excitement by reading it. It's so exciting finding out what's going on episode to episode. It's been a long time since I've had a series that I'm this excited about, and not to want to be spoiled. Which really isn't a spoiler, technically, if you just read the manga. It's been out for years. But I'm really enjoying the anime's ride and the way they're telling this story. This fella, let me think if he had any big moments in Season 1. Nothing of note, really. He ended up, I think, hiding when the League of Villains decided to attack UA and try and attack. I think they were after All Might, and they ended up attacking all the students. And they never showed what he did, and I think he even mentioned that you didn't know where I was. It's a pretty interesting story, and no one really cared. So from Season 1 on, he did enter the sports festival, and that was he did make it to the final 8 in the sports festival, so that's pretty dope. I mean, there was a lot of kids in that sports festival. That's got to say something. Not necessarily that he's strong, but he, in a way, strategically got through the first set of events and made it to the final 8, which seemed pretty prestigious of that little group they had going on there. But he was easily defeated by Pinky, or Mina, in the first round when she melted his naval laser belt that helps him use his quirk, which I don't think we really knew at the time that once that thing's taken care of, he's pretty much unable to use the quirk, at least as a straight-up laser. He said something about it leaking out later on in the series. He gets beaten by having it basically melted off by Mina's acid. I don't remember if he did anything of note in Season 2. I know that when they ended up in the summer camp saga time in Season 3, I want to say, the beginning of Season 3. I could be completely wrong. No, I think it was the summer of Season 3, right beginning. They make it to the camp, and he's practicing on being able to use his naval laser more often by using it, and because it hurts his tummy if he uses it too much. So he's basically pushing his limits and trying to make his limits longer. And that's really all you can do with that. I really think that a lot of these kids, including Aoyama, should also focus on hand-to-hand combat. And yes, increase your quirk, but it seems like they don't do a lot of focusing on hand-to-hand combat for some of these kids that don't have strength-enhancing quirks, or even Todoroki, who I'm sure has learned a lot of hand-to-hand combat from Endeavor. I assume he got his ass kicked every day as a little kid. So if somebody gets past his ice and fire, he needs to be able to handle himself physically. And I think Aoyama's the same way. If he can't, that laser is not too great, and especially if somebody melts the belt that allows him to use it, he needs to be prepared to fight. This kid wears a very flashy uniform, a flashy superhero outfit that doesn't look too combat ready, but it does look like it's defensive, if you could say that. It's very armor-like. It's like a shining knight. It's a really cool outfit. It's just, to me, it seems it would be hard to fight hand-to-hand if he did decide to learn how to do so. I mean, look at Eraserhead. Eraserhead has a quirk where he can erase quirks, which is great, but he couldn't do anything else if he didn't learn how to kick people's asses with his utility, with his sidekick rope thing, the damn scarf. His scarf that he got made for himself. I'm not 100% sure where he got that scarf. I'm sure he just got it made, and he figured out a way to fight with it. I think Aoyama needs to find a weapon to add to his arsenal. A sword of sorts would fit the gimmick he's trying to put off with his outfit. The knight-like armor he wears. If he had like a sword that was also like a utility knife that had multiple parts to it that he could use to not only enhance his quirk, but also defend himself if his quirk fails to do the job. I would have to say that this kid will never be a solo pro on his own, and if he's probably going to end up being a sidekick, to be honest. I'd be shocked if this kid becomes anything more than a sidekick or a very low on the totem pole pro. There's a lot of pros out there that become sidekicks that serve better pros, like Endeavor, like Ingenium, the original Ingenium, Ida's brother. He had a shit ton of sidekicks, and I assume they all at one point, at least some of them, wanted to be full-blown full-blown pros, and they were probably working towards that. I could see Aoyama working... At this point in the story, I could not see him on his own out there fighting major villains. I could see him out there taking out the trash if he learns some hand-to-hand combat and he stays safe and he picks the right villains to combat with, but I couldn't see this kid taking on a guy like Stain, or Dobby, and really any of the maybe Spinner. I think he could possibly handle Spinner but Spinner seems to know some physical skills. But if Aoyama had a sword, a utility sword of sorts to fight with, he could have that just in case the laser fails or the belt gets damaged. I'm not sure if you take the belt off, if he can just fire an even more intense version of his belly laser, naval laser. I'm not 100% sure on that, because that's kind of what happens with Scott, or Cyclops from X-Men. If you take his glasses off, he's got no control and it just fires out even stronger. It's like the goggles keep it contained, kind of like this belt. I am curious if he can actually fire it in any way. Otherwise, he can't seem to fire it for long, so to me it tells me it's very limited, and it would probably only spew out like vomit and not like a laser. That laser stores, I'm assuming that belt stores the energy and focuses it, the little bit that is there, into one straight line, and that's why he needs it, and it also contains it. This kid seems to have an interesting backstory that we don't know too much about. We know that he can't handle his quirk without his belt, and he feels ashamed about that. So the kid is, in Season 3, he hides from the League of Villains for the most part, and doesn't get to do a whole lot there. But he does, at the very end, as the League of Villains are escaping, he does help rescue Tsukiyomi, bird fella, and they save that dude. But the thing is, they still get away with their primary target, Bakugo. But he did have a moment there, and that was cool. He had a little bit of a moment there. He has had more moments than some characters out there. Some other members of Class 1A, Tail Fella, boy who speaks to animals but doesn't say a whole lot otherwise. And even Sato, or I think his name's Sato, Sugar Rush Fella. I think Aoyama's had much more development than those three. I think he's got about equal, maybe more than Sero, but just barely. Less than Mineta, but you like him more than Mineta. That's for sure. I sure do. But Aoyama has potential to be more, and they could develop him into more. There was actually a really cool part later in the season when they were trying to get their provisional licenses to basically go semi-pro. Where he sacrifices himself by shooting his laser into the sky to give Ida a chance to run away or something, or hide and wait for people to show up and attack him, and then use them to pass the test. He becomes the sacrificial lamb. He's like, I was a coward when the villains showed up. I was a coward both times the villains showed up, and I barely helped the second time. So I'm going to make this sacrifice. And I feel like they should have allowed him to not pass that test. For one, he's not ready to be a semi-pro in any way, shape, or form. A few of those kids aren't. But he was definitely not. He's not at that point. And he could have not passed this time. They could take the test again later. And it would have been more impactful knowing that he failed that part of if he was the only kid to fail that part of the exam. Oh man, it would be interesting. They could put him on his own path. He's got to wait, who knows, 6 months or a year before he can take the test again. He's got to do extra night classes, shit like that. They could have had a little bit of a gimmick going there for him. But no, they let him get through and get his provisional. He's just like the rest of the sheep, the background sheep that don't get to do anything. which is fine. I mean, I'm not super interested currently in him expanding his character in any way into the main baby faces, into the main good guys. I don't think he doesn't fit. He's a sidekick. He's a side boy. But he could definitely have a really cool side story going on. Meanwhile, what's Aoyama doing? I'd watch that. You can have a little filler episode for the fella. Getting his license a year from now. Maybe he doesn't get it till year 2. Who knows? Maybe the kid dies at some point in the story. That would be interesting if he makes the ultimate sacrifice down the line. He's already willing to do so in a mock battle. So it's possible. I guess the final thing we find out about him up until the point that I'm at in the story, into season 5, he ends up being kind of acting really weird in season 4, I want to say, and he makes Deku feel weird because he's being very observant of Deku, of Izuku, Midoriya. And he wants to talk to him. And it felt like they were really setting up Aoyama as possibly the spy. Like this whole time this kid has been lying. I think he's an exchange student, so it makes so much sense for him to be a spy. Total red herring, because there's been this rumor that there is a undercover person in the school leaking information, and it could be a student, it could be a teacher, it could be a janitor for all we know. And Aoyama fits he could have done it. He's weird. He's a weirdo. He's always hiding in the battles. He's never front and center. He could have been a perfect choice, and I think they should have pulled the trigger there. Even if they didn't, it would have been really cool if this whole thing, his whole character was an act. If he wasn't a goofball, really, and he was only doing that to just seem completely unsuspicious, I guess. He's so weird that nobody would suspect him as the leak. And maybe he's even stronger than he is, and the belt was all bullshit, and it just kept him contained. And that was just part of his power, and that just keeps his energy. I don't know. There's so many things they could have done. They could have made him into a major kid villain that was somehow related to the League of Villains, or somehow related to All for One, his son or his grandkid, something weird, or somebody somehow related, or just a part of the crew. Maybe he's older than he looks. There's so many possibilities. It would have been very interesting if they decided to go down that route with Aoyama, and I think they still can with a different 1A student. They can't with Aoyama now. They already played their hand with this guy. He's actually just interested in Deku because he likes the cut of his jib. He likes the fact that Deku couldn't control his quirk at first too, and he found a way to make it work. And he wants to do the same. And he is doing his version of the same. He's using his belt, and he's doing his very best, and that's cool. And he's developing, and that's great. He's getting a lot more development than most background characters at his level in other anime. So there's that. And he's got a lot more development than a handful of other 1A students. So there's that. So he does have that going for him going forward. Other than that, he fought some Class B students in Season 5 so far. He was part of a team. Nothing of real importance that I can personally remember. He's got potential, but so does almost every student in UA. They all have potential. The writer of My Hero Academia could take them all in so many different directions. They could have a spin-off. They could have episodes, arcs based around these kids away from Izuku. They could put Izuku in the hospital for a while. Whatever. But these kids are all developed enough, in my opinion, they could lead a small arc, a small story in pairs, or even some of them individually. Aoyama, I think he could have his own background story arc, or something to do with his family down the line. Yes. Is it something I'm begging for? No. But I like the kid. And he's comedic relief at least, but he's also a lot more in depth than that. and I appreciate the amount of care that goes into the My Hero Academia students and the pros and the villains. It's all fanfare-tastic. And this has been my review of Aoyama from My Hero Academia. I'm Mr. Morphetto, and if you could please like, comment, and share this video, it would help me out oh so much. And please click and subscribe to the Mr. Morphetto channel. I'll talk to you later.